is that good general advice, or is that kind of specific advice?
This is me being really paranoid.
Okay.
So I would say it's good advice to check your issue.
Sounds
Just
good,
so
thanks.
someone doesn't send you a mad jot,
Yeah.
and then because you forgot to turn on the options to validate the signature, because people do, it would still work. So data protection, this is what we use to protect cookies and a bunch of other stuff. It's also what we use to protect our CSRF tokens. We use it for ephemeral data, things that you can throw away that you don't particularly care about. But with a little bit of effort and making sure that you persist your keys properly and don't throw them away, you can use this for your own stuff. Because everyone is horrible, no one reads the docs, as we found out when we changed how machine key worked in previous versions of the .NET framework. They're like, you've broken all the stuff that I've protected with it. I'm like, the docs say this is for stuff that you don't care about losing. We didn't read that. So, still, data protection is meant for ephemeral data, but we've made it a little bit more foolproof if you don't want to pay any attention to when I say it's for ephemeral data. So, we are making really opinionated decisions for you because, quite frankly, crypto is hard. We are going to rotate keys for you automatically. We will isolate individual applications that share the same encryption key keychain for you. We will provide isolations based on purposes. So if you use data protection and you say, I want to protect a CSRF token, and then you try and pass it into the data protection mechanism that says, I want to protect a cookie, the two things can't communicate. So we're providing two sets of isolation. We're going to try and figure out where you store your keys based on an app platform. We know what to do in Azure. We have no idea what to do in AWS. All of the AWS people, if they want to write an automatic provider, they are more than happy to. We try and figure out if you are on a local machine running IIS. If you are on Linux, we'll try and put it in your user profile. And if we don't know what to do, there will be this log in your web server log that says we have no idea what to do. Therefore, we are storing your keys in memory and we will throw them away. Which is why I say this is aimed at ephemeral data.
So you say provides isolation for applications automatically.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean? Like
so I have application 1 and I have application 2.
Right.
And they share the same key ring.
Okay.
So application 1, when it uses data protection,
Right.
cannot decrypt application 2's.
So how do you determine that application 1 is different from application 2?
We automatically generate an application name based on various parts of the hosting platform.
Okay.
So Azure gives us an individual one, which is some sort of weird GUID that they have, combined with a bunch of other stuff. If you're on IIS, we'll use the file path. If you're on Apache, we'll try and use the file path as well, and we'll do a best guess effort. You can overwrite it and set your own.
Okay. So, but if
Which
they're
is how
like
you can get
if
things
they're
to
on
share.
different servers, different path, but the same app, that's fixable.
IIS gets it right.
Okay.
Linux, I think we're pulling out server name as well.
Okay.
So you can get it sort of wrong,
Okay.
in which case you can specify it yourself. So it's quite easy to write new key stores. We provide a bunch. File system, registry, Redis, Key Vault for Azure. We're looking at finally doing a SQL one or something based on the EF, but it's slightly more complicated than we expected. But if you want to write one, if you want to write your own custom store, it's a matter of implementing two methods in an interface. One which is read all keys, and the other one which is write a new key, and that's it. And we have custom algorithm support, which is not for you. It is for Russia.
I guess.
It is for Russia when you are forced to use Ghost.
Store, right?
Well, yeah, but
is it for real? So you're sucking up to authoritarian government?
well, yes, because we're sucking up to the U.S. So you have the option to replace this because certain governments require certain algorithms. So Russia and China, you can swap them out. We do not implement them for you. If you want to suck up, you're on your own. We just provide you the extension point. And then, of course, as the US pushes for encryption backdoors, they might give you that. So here is what we do. Algorithm rise. We have 512-bit master key, we roll it every 90 days. Derived keys are based on purpose in every single payload. So if you try and run the same thing through data protection each time, it will change. We use AES-256 CBC for encryption with HMAC, SHA-256 for authenticity. That answers your encryption question.
Yes, the reason I have a question is because I used to develop like an Angular SPA app and then do authentication with the Azure ADAL library.
Yes.
I got the encrypted cookie, but that encrypted cookie is just a string 64 base encryption.
That's not encrypted. What you are getting from ADAL is a JOT token.
Okay.
JOT tokens are meant to be clear text. You are validating the signature on a JOT token. It does not provide any encryption quite specifically. Now you can turn it on. It is optional. No one ever does because it increases the payload size so much.
Oh,
So yeah, you're not supposed to put secrets in JOTs.
I see. So I'm not sure you have answer for that. So in that case, let's say I want to get the encrypted cookie from the ADAL, like Azure, and then
You
pass
cannot.
that cookie.
You cannot. It's not a cookie.
Okay.
It's a bearer token. It is a JOT token in their case, and they do not provide support for encrypting that because that's not what the JOT token, the JOT standard does. There was optional encryption on it, which is Jose, and I don't believe they implement that yet.
Okay.
But that's a question for ADAL, not for me.
Yeah. And that is the recommended solution from the support team.
Yes, and it's the same for getting it from Facebook,
Yeah.
getting it from Google, getting it from Twitter. No one encrypts their JOT tokens. Auth0 is going to be exactly the same. That's just how the horrible flow works for SPA apps.
So we can counterfeit that.
No,
No,
you
'cause
can't
there's a
counterfeit
signature.
it. There is a signature. Signatures are separate from encryption. So when you configure ADAL or any of your JOT providers in there, you say, here is a list of signing keys. And when it goes through and when it parses, it will look at the signature on the JOT. It will recompute the signature using the signing keys that you've given it. And if there's a match, it's all good. If there's no match, it rejects the JOT. So signature validation is separate from encryption. And signature means you can't tamper with it.
Okay.
It's just that the data itself is not hidden.
I see. So is there any future plan that like the ASP .NET Core support the validation of the
But we do.
cookie?
It's there right now. It's in the JOT middleware.
Oh,
When you wire it out. Now, if you wire up ADAL, if you say use Active Directory, there is an endpoint for OAuth that says give me your signing keys. So we go off and we get all the valid signing keys for the issuer that you're talking to in the background without you having to do anything, and then validate as they come down. And we'll go refresh those keys every 24 hours.
okay. So let me reiterate. So in that case, the SPA app just grab that very like jar.
Yeah, it
and-
goes through
and
its
pass
steps.
along to the ASP web API,
Yep.
and then web API will validate.
Yes,
it.
and we do all the magic without you having to configure anything.
Oh.
And we'll do that for a bunch of other things. If they are supporting the OAuth metadata endpoint for key discovery, we'll do it.
Cool.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, at this point, you don't need encryption. You are able to validate that the token has come from the provider that you expect it to have come from, and it has not been tampered with in transit. As long as you're not putting something super top secret in the job. But if it's coming from AED, you're not, because there's nothing super top secret there.
Okay.
Key stores. So Azure Web Apps will do. Unfortunately, it doesn't work cross slots. So if you're doing A/B testing, the user gets logged out depending on what server they've gone to. This is a long outstanding request we have with Azure. If you need this, shout at them. There's not a lot I can do. IIS with no user profile, we'll stick it in the registry and we'll protect it using DP API. IIS with user profile, we'll stick it in app data. Same with Linux. Or we'll put it in memory and discard it at the end of the day. And we can protect it in multiple ways. For Windows, we have DP API and DP API NG. For cross-platform stuff, you can provide it an X509 certificate, and that will be used to encrypt and decrypt keys. We have Azure Key Vault, and then we have the worst possible thing, which is just shoving it all in plain text. But hey, it works on Linux. You can use an X509 certificate on Linux, but Linux doesn't have this concept of the certificate store. So the X509 certificate is still going to be lying around on disk somewhere, and you're going to have to hard code a password into your app or into a config file. So what is the point? You can use all these things manually. You create an data protection provider. You can then just call protect and unprotect with purposes. And the purpose is there for that isolation stuff that I talked about. So here's an example. We're going to spin up the new ephemeral data protection provider so everything gets thrown away when we're done. We create a protector with this purpose that we use for isolation within an app. Then call protect and call unprotect. And that thing is encrypted and signed with an authenticated signature. So you can't tamper with it. You don't get a padding oracle. You don't get a timing oracle because we will validate the signature first before we try and do any decryption. Purposes are there for isolation. Do not use user input for a purpose. That's a really silly thing to do. It would allow an attacker to change what a data protection instance is supposed to do. So like I say, we have configuration points. We have key stores, where you're storing your keys. We have the encryption of how we encrypt things. Then we have key expiration policies. You can set these things to rotate after a certain amount of time. The way we tested this was we spun up 50 VMs with a rotation of 15 minutes, started them all running at once, and then just started sending requests and saw if anything fell over. So we're pretty darn confident you're not going to get deadlocks in any of this. We have a forward compatibility for .NET 4.5. Rather than try and make .NET Core less, well, it's not less secure, but lower its standards to meet .NET 4.5, the compatibility we have is we pull .NET 4.5.2 or .NET 4.6.1 up to use the same code in .NET Core. So you can change, you can plug this into your previous .NET apps, and the cookies that they issue for authentication will then be in a format that ASP.NET Core can understand and deserialize. So here's how we configure it. We're going to tell it where we want to store our keys. We're going to tell it how we want to protect our keys. And here is our application name that we can manually set to either share keys between applications or isolate. You want to do it yourself? That's all you need to do. Get all elements, store element. It is incredibly simple. And for Azure, we have a Key Vault protection provider. You still need a backing store because, like I say, protection is separated out from the key store. So we have Azure Blob Storage, which is the nice way to do it in Azure. You have your keys being stored in Blob Store, and then you tell Key Vault to actually protect the stuff that's in Blob Store, so it's protected at rest. Like I say, back compatibility, we're just pulling things up. It gets a little bit complicated to set up. There are docs there that are gradually getting moved into the docs repo. But I like doing things in my own GitHub repo because I can change them with very, very little effort as I find bugs. So, general enhancements. We changed the way HTML encoding works. It used to be that it was based on an unsafe list. We are now based on a safe list. They are in DI and can be injected into DI. We will HTML encode an awful lot more than we used to. You can change the default Unicode code ranges that are encoded based on who you are targeting your app at. So if you are targeting your app at Japan, you may want to safe list the whole kanji set. But by default, we are limiting ourselves to European-centric languages because those are the safest ones. There have been a bunch of problems in browsers when they have people have set weird code pages in their websites, and then Shift 7 has been used. It's allowed the bypass of a bunch of filters, so we chose what was safest, which is horrifically European and American centric, but there you have it. You can punch holes as you like. CSRF tokens, which we talked about earlier, they are automatically put into forms. You can set them to be automatically checked. We have CORS middleware, and finally, we defaulted our environment to release, which was the result of an 8.5-month argument with David Fowler. It used to be that people would just push things out in web.config with debug equals true on, and you would get yellow screens of death with full stack traces and other fun. Now, if you have to jump through hoops to make a machine, a development machine that will give you a full stack trace. You have to set environment variables, but by default, if that environment variable is not there, we will default to release. Visual Studio sets that for you when it starts your process. Here's how you enable the automatic CSRF validation, and look, oh, we have ignore anti-forgery token, which is what you would end up doing in your APIs. Here's how we can get things in views. If you are in an Ajax application and you are authenticating with a cookie, one, you need to reconsider your life choices, but I know we don't make this easy because we still don't have a JWT token provider. That will be in Q2, hopefully. You can actually get the CSRF tokens, so you can include them in your requests if you wish as a header. One thing to note is that when a user logs in, we change the CSRF token because the CSRF token now contains an embedded username now that we know who a user is. And the reason we do that is we want to protect against people who are hosting on shared domains, like Azure Websites domain. So if I'm on badsite.azurewebsites.net, I can set a cookie that is valid for everything under azurewebsites.net. That's just how it works. AzureWebsites.net is a bad example because I added that to the unsafe list in Chrome, which now all the browsers do. But say example.com, so something that's hosted on one.example.com can set a cookie for all example.com, so it comes down to 2. So that's why we add a username into the CSRF token once someone has logged in. If you are doing a login process through Ajax without refreshing through a view, then the cookie never gets updated. But you can get at it like that, and we have a bunch of documentation and examples of how to do it in Angular and a bunch of other things. I honestly cannot keep up with the number of JavaScript frameworks that pop out every week for you. But we have a bunch. Secrets. It is horrifying the number of people that have checked things into GitHub. So we have this isolation thing where we have a user secrets manager that is really only meant to be used for development time. It stores the secrets outside of your source code directory so they can't accidentally be checked in. We have support for Azure Key Vault for secrets, so you can set all your bits and pieces in Azure Key Vault and point your app to Azure Key Vault, or you can just set them as environment variables through Azure's control panel or AWS's control panel or whatever. Or you can develop your own and store them all in SQL. So, that is a horrendously quick run through. What is coming into 1? From a security point of view, not that much. What we have done is we have taken away the amount of utter stuff, that's the right way to put it, that we put into a template when you add ASP.NET Identity. If you do file new in ASP.NET Identity, you will see that there are controllers upon controllers upon controllers upon controllers. We have a new ability in 2.1 to pre-compile views into NuGet packages. So now when you add identity, it's going to pull in a single NuGet package, and you don't see any of this stuff in your layout anymore. It's not yours. You can still override it by, there will be scaffolding, so you can right-click and say, extract this view so I can override it. In the current version that we have out, the current VDAV, the only scaffolding is via the command line, and it says just scaffold out the entire thing. That will change. And that's really about it. We've added some more interesting things to Kestrel. We've added some stuff around host validation and the way that you can tweak things. But there's nothing really big security-wise. This has been more about stability and making things easier. 2.2, hopefully we will have job issuance and have identity as an OAuth service. So, questions? Or do you all just want to go to the pub? Hello.
Can I ask you a ton of questions at the pub?
No, because I will not be going to the pub. because I have to
Ask you a
get.
ton of questions here later.
My dog gets me up at 4:30. Therefore, I go to bed at 9:30 because it's the only way I can get a decent amount of sleep with my CPAP
But
machine.
that's in the UK, right?
No. So generally, I'm not going to the pub and I am not hanging around because I need to get home to fall asleep. You can, of course, email me
Okay.
if that
No,
works.
no one uses email anymore. That's great. I'm so over.
I use email. I hit Slack. I hit Teams. Twitter is okay, but when it comes to security questions, I need
No,
more than
Twitter's not okay.
256.
The water's on fire.
Yeah, everything's on fire. Email is good. If it's a bunch of complicated questions, email is usually better than anything else. Anyone else? No. Well, that's it for me then.
Get a lot of emails.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.